So UFC 310 is just around the corner, which means that it is time for me to give my full card breakdowns and predictions for every single fight on this card. And guys, I know that this card is taking quite a bit of heat, right? Because it's the last pay-per-view of the year. People have these very high expectations. We were supposed to have Belal Muhammad defending the title against Shavkat Rakhmonov, and the deck has been shuffled, right? The main event is now Alexandre Pantoja taking on Kai Asakura, the new kid on the block from Reyes. We have Shavkat versus Ian Garry, which is essentially a number one contender fight. I think that this is actually a pretty darn good card. And I think that what kind of makes things look really bad aesthetically when you look at the main card is the fact that Bryce Mitchell versus Gracie somehow was thrown on the main card. I mean, that fight is definitely a prelim bout. Aljo versus Mobsar Evloev, I think, should be on the main card over that one. So outside of the little bit of weird placements in terms of some of the fights, I think that this is actually a pretty good card. I'm excited for it. Let's hop into this, starting with our very first fight of the evening between Kennedy Nzechukwu and Luque Brzeski. Now, this fight to me is pretty cut and dry, right? With Kennedy Nzechukwu, you're looking at a former light heavyweight that's going up to heavyweight, and we all know about we've heard about this, right? When you're a lighter guy, you go up a weight class, maybe you don't have the same strength, maybe you don't have the same power, but normally you're going to be a little bit more technical. Normally you're going to be a little bit speedier and a little bit more diverse when it comes to your overall skill set. And I think that that's what this fight just ultimately comes down to for me, is I believe Kennedy Nzechukwu at heavyweight is going to be a problem, right? When he gets inside the top of the division, I don't know that he beats some of those guys, but when we're talking about some of just the other dudes in the division like Luque Brzeski, I think Kennedy Nzechukwu is absolutely going to pick Luque Brzeski apart in this matchup. And I mean, you come off that last win from Kennedy Nzechukwu against Chris Barnett. I know Chris Barnett maybe had some injuries. He spent some time away. He had to pull out of some fights. Like, it was kind of a rocky road for Chris coming into it. But take nothing away from Kennedy. He did an absolutely great job of backing Chris Barnett up, fighting behind that long range. He just looks so much faster than Barnett in there. And I think that that's something we're going to see with Kennedy Nzechukwu at heavyweight. I think he's just going to look faster. He's going to be a little bit more technical. And him utilizing that long 83-inch reach, I think is going to be very much on display. Because if you look at some of these losses, I mean, they're not particularly good losses, right? Getting TKO'd, and finished by Dustin Jacoby, losing to Ovince St. Preux by split decision, not particularly good looks. But now kind of goes up to heavyweight here, starting off on a good foot against Chris Barnett. I think Kennedy is a well-rounded guy, where Luque Brzeski getting knocked out by Mick Parkin, who's a guy on the rise in the heavyweight division. I think Mick Parkin's a good fighter, goes out there, beats Walter Walker, who I actually think is a pretty solid grappler. But loses to Waldo Cortez Acosta, loses to Carl Williams, loses to Martin Boudet. I mean, losing to Martin Boudet by split decision, I mean, that's pretty crazy as it is right there. But for me, the skill set of Kennedy Nzechukwu, he's coming up, a weight class here. He looks fast. He looks rangy. He fights behind that good long front kick up the middle that I think is going to frustrate a lot of opponents in this weight class. I think Kennedy Nzechukwu is actually going to get the first round finish here. That's why I put round one here. I'm going to be a little bit bold in my predictions on this card, giving a round and how I see the fight playing out if there's a finish. So I'm going Kennedy Nzechukwu by stoppage. Moving on to Clay Guida versus Chase Hooper. Now, I think this fight is kind of cut and dry, right? Clay Guida, he's a dude that is just, I mean, when you talk about Clay Guida, this dude is he's a workhorse. He's the carpenter. He's a dude that comes in and just kind of puts his work boots on, and he goes to work in there. He's going to rely on the wrestling, kind of a relentless style of pace. And he does have some decent submissions, but the problem here is Clay Guida's, he's losing to Joaquim Silva, who's a solid opponent by decisions. Going out there losing to Rafa Garcia by decision. He is beating Scott Holtzman, and it was there live for that fight. It was Scott Holtzman's last fight, I believe. Then before that, he's losing to Claudio Puelles, and then he's beating Leonardo Santos. I mean, the strength of schedule, not very strong for Clay Guida. And then when you go over to the other side here with Chase Hooper, coming off of a sensational victory over Vyacheslav Borshov in his last performance, and he was actually able to hurt Slava on the feet to where I was really surprised by that. But to drop Slava claws and then jump on a submission. I mean, that is really a fighter's worst nightmare when you're taking on Chase Hooper, is getting rocked on the feet, because when it comes to the grappling, not many people in the division are going to be able to hang with him, at least towards the back end. When he gets into the, the top echelon of the lightweight division, there could be some guys for sure. But right now, Chase Hooper's a stud, man. He's figuring it out. He's tall, he's long, he's rangy. That win over Slava, goes out there, subs Jordan Levitt, gets the decision win over Nick Fiore, and then he lost to Steve Garcia by KO, but that was 2 years ago. This is a guy that's been making a lot of improvements since he's moved up a weight class. I believe that Chase Hooper is dangerous. I think on the feet, he is going to cause Clay some issues, being the long rangier guy, and I don't think Clay can just come out here and chase takedowns like he's used to doing. I think that he has to be very, very careful the way he approaches Chase Hooper, to where Chase can get a little bit more reckless, right? Where's really the threat here with Clay Guida, other than just getting wrestled, for 15 minutes and just getting, drowned in terms of the pace and the pressure? I don't think that's going to be an issue for the 25-year-old Chase Hooper. He's really starting to hit his stride. Clay Guida, 42 years of age, just really a legend inside the sport is Guida. But I think ultimately Chase Hooper striking on the feet is, his range, his timing that he's starting to really kind of develop as we go here. I'm not saying he's some like world-class striker or anything, but I do believe that he has enough on the feet to give Clay Guida some problems. And then I think when the fight hits the floor, even if Clay does try to entertain the grappling, I think Chase Hooper is able to find a submission. Don't think it happens in the first round. I'm going to go Chase Hooper by second round sub. Moving on, we have Michael Chiesa taking on Max Griffin. Now, I actually really like this matchup here, because I'm an advocate for when we got two older guys or dudes that are just, look, we're not competing for championships out here. Like, Michael Chiesa is not competing for the title, but Max Griffin, he's not competing for the title. Let's just put two old heads in there. Look, we got a 39-year-old Max Griffin here and a 37-year-old Michael Chiesa, who's behind the desk doing a lot of analyst work. And to me, this is a very cut and dry matchup here. And it's actually kind of surprising me, the odds down here, because a lot of people are tending to lean towards Michael Chiesa in this matchup. And I honestly think Max Griffin is going to win this fight. I believe that Max Griffin has the boxing, he's got the timing, and he has the footwork and enough speed on the feet to kind of keep Michael Chiesa at range. Because from what we've seen from Chiesa, he goes out there against Tony Ferguson and gets a very quick submission. That's Tony Ferguson, the ghost of Tony Ferguson, a dude who doesn't even look like he should be in there competing anymore. And then before that, he loses to Kevin Holland by submission, loses to Sean Brady by decision, goes out there, gets subbed by Vicente Luque, and the last, win before that, the Ferguson fight, was almost 4 years ago against Neil Magny, where he's getting a decision win. So it's been a while since we've really seen a vintage Michael Chiesa. I'm not even going to count the Tony Ferguson fight. And then Max Griffin going out there getting a split decision win over Jeremiah Wells. I think that's a pretty impressive win. Jeremiah Wells is a tough fighter. Michael Morales, you go in there and lose to him. Who's not losing to Michael Morales? Undefeated prospect. The dude's doing Spider-Man shit on the side of the cage. Like, the dude's a well-rounded fighter. He's got good striking. He's the full package. He's going to be a problem in the welterweight division. No problem there. Goes out there, beats Tim Means by decision. Tim Means, a little towards the end of the road. That's 2 years ago. Still a solid win. Goes out there, loses to Neil Magny by decision, and then beats Carlos Condit by decision. So two older guys here, but I am actually going to go Max Griffin by finish. I actually think that he is able to find the chin on Michael Chiesa. I expect Michael, obviously we know his game plan. He's going to come out, he's going to look to grapple heavy, look to try to jump on some sort of submission. I think Max Griffin, he's a dude that is fighting some young up-and-coming guys like Jeremiah Wells. He's been in there with Michael Morales. He's been in there with veterans. He's been in there with the up-and-coming guys. I think Max Griffin's been in there with the tougher competition, more consistently here. And he's faced an array of opponents to where he has the veteran experience. He still looks a little bit more youthful to me in his fighting style compared to Michael Chiesa. I think as long as Max can defend the takedowns, keep the fight on the feet to where he can let his boxing combinations fly and keep Chiesa at range, I think Max Griffin is able to find the chin of Chiesa. Like I said, I think Chiesa has some success early with the grappling, and if he can't find a finish early, I think Max Griffin takes over and starts to pick him apart on the feet with the boxing. Moving on, we have Cody Durden versus Joshua Van. Now, I'm actually really looking forward to this fight here because Joshua Van is someone that I've been really high on. If you've been following my channel, I've been very high on Joshua Van. I think that he is one of the best boxers in the UFC. I know we got Petr Yan, Ilia Topuria, Max Holloway, Poirier. We got guys like that. But I think one of the unsung heroes for that nomination is Joshua Van. And I think coming into this fight, I actually picked Joshua Van, to win that fight against Edgar Chairez at the Sphere on short notice, to where he came in as a last-minute replacement. I was like, look, Edgar Chairez, the dude's tough. He's got some good striking. He can put a pace on you. He's gritty. He's tough. He finds ways to win. But I'm like, Joshua Van's too technical. The boxing, and if you don't have boxing that can match this guy, or a relentless wrestling style pace, you're going to be in some trouble. And outside of this loss here to Charles Johnson, which was later in the fight, Joshua Van has been a stud. Goes out there, wins a decision over Edgar Chairez. We even saw him implement some grappling in that matchup. Goes out there against Felipe Boons, I think I'm pronouncing that right. Gets a KO. Then goes out there against Kevin Borjas. Wins by decision. Split decision here. But look, Joshua Van, the boxing, the angles, the timing, the way he rips to the body, the way he mixes up the combinations. I think we are looking at a real contender here in the flyweight division. The guy's only 23 years old, man. So to go out there, lose to Charles Johnson, a little bit of a hiccup, comes back on short notice, finds a way to get the job done against Edgar Chairez, I was beyond impressed. We saw the improvements in the grappling. We know about the boxing. And he's going in here against Cody Durden, who, is coming off a ninja choke submission over Matt Schnell. Matt Schnell's kind of getting beat by everybody at this point, let's be honest. Goes out there, gets finished by Bruno Silva. Goes out there, gets finished by Tiger, which that's not a bad loss there. Beats Jake Hadley by submission, and then beats Charles Johnson by decision. So again, MMA math doesn't always add up. What I see here is I think that if Cody Durden, a guy that relies on durability, relies on that kind of relentless style of pressure, if he can mix in the grappling behind the striking, I think that Cody Durden can have some success in this matchup and can possibly take down Joshua Van and control him and find himself in a position to where maybe he's able to get a finish in the grappling or, by decision. But I really think Joshua Van is just that good. I think Joshua Van, when his young career in terms of MMA before he got to the UFC, the strides that we have seen from him in terms of the grappling and the takedown defense has just been leaps and bounds. And I believe in this fight, we are going to see Joshua Van with a full camp. I think that we are going to see him focused. I think that we are going to see him dialed in to where he's not worried about the cardio because he took it on 2 weeks' notice. I think he comes in ready to go. I expect Cody to give him some issues early on with the grittiness and some of the wrestling that I think he's going to try to bring to the table. But eventually, I think Joshua Van, digs to the body, starts to take some of the wind out of the sail, backs him up against the fence, starts letting the boxing combinations fly, and is able to get Durden out of there. I'm going to go third round finish. I could even see it being sooner, but I'm just going to say third round here. Moving on. We have Chris Weidman versus Eric Anders. I'm not going to go too in-depth with this because this was supposed to take place at UFC 309, and I have pretty strong feelings about this. Look, I'm actually surprised by the odds here that a lot of people are picking Chris Weidman to win this fight because Chris Weidman, he goes out there against Bruno Silva, and it was eye pokes galore. He poked Bruno Silva. We were calling him Chris Poke, eye poke Weidman, whatever you want to call him, because poke Weidman, whatever. This dude was out there every time Bruno Silva tried to close the distance, he's getting poked in the damn eye. So what does that do to your opponent? John Jones's opponents back at 205, they knew, don't close the distance, dog, because I'm sticking my fingers out. So that definitely is something that plays a factor into deterring your opponent from closing the distance. So I think that is something, that's kind of a weird win to me. Then he goes out there, loses to Brad Tavares by decision. Goes out there, the nasty, check by Uriah Hall that broke the leg of Chris Weidman. So it's been a lot of up and down for Chris Weidman, and before that, getting a win here. But this was 4 years ago here. So really, the activity started here with Brad Tavares and then Bruno Silva coming off of the leg injury. Weidman's a guy that I always have said I think has always had a very overrated career. If Anderson Silva was not showboating, I don't think Anderson Silva loses to Weidman in that fight. However, it's a fight, things happen. But other than that, I think Weidman's got good wrestling. He's got decent striking on the feet, but the dude's 40 years of age. He looks like it in there to me. He looks slow. And then on the other side, you have Eric Anders, right? Eric Anders is 37, former football player, played at Alabama. I think he spent a little bit of time in the league. Eric is a good athlete. He's a big dude. He's spent, he's been at middleweight, light heavyweight. I mean, he's just kind of bounced around, and he's been in there with some really, really good competition, and that's what you see here. I mean, losing to Andre Muniz, losing to Jung Yoon Park, goes out there, KOs Kyle Dawkins, loses to Marc-Andre Barrial, not particularly a great loss to have on your record, goes out there, beats Jimmy Pickett by decision, but some of the fights in the past, like against Thiago Santos, against Roundtree, like Anders has been in there with some really good fighters, but those fights just never went his way. But when you don't present a crazy threat in terms of a finishing ability, Eric is usually a guy that can go in there, hang with just about everybody, if not outwork you in terms of, the physicality when it comes to the grappling, when it comes to, hiding the takedowns behind the striking. And I think on the feet, Eric is just going to be a step faster than Chris. I think Chris really, I know he's training with Wonderboy Thompson and all these different things. He's slow to me. He looks sloppy on the feet, and I don't think that that's going to work against Eric, where Eric's a big dude. He's going to push forward, look to utilize the boxing. I think Eric Anders is able to close him down, land some good shots, push him up against the fence, just make this kind of a gritty, dirty, grimy type of fight to where Eric pulls out a decision win here over Chris Weidman. Moving on. We have Randy Brown versus Bryan Battle. This is one of the fights that when I saw this get announced, I was licking my chops, man, because I'm like, this is a great fight here. Because with Bryan Battle, coming off that incredible win over Kevin Jesset, getting a finish over there in France, getting on the microphone, saying all the wild shit that he's saying. Like, Bryan Battle, how can you not like this guy? Coming off of the Ultimate Fighter, Brian Dubronk's battle out there with the Charles Oliveira looking hair. He's just a different dude out there, man. And then before this, getting the submission win over AJ Fletcher, beating Gabe Green by KO, and then the Ainge Losa finish, or DQ, or whatever the hell this was here. No contest. Accidental eye poke. Bryan Battle was dominating this fight. Losa knew he was in trouble, and he's like, I can't see, so they stopped the fight, and then immediately after, everything seems to be just fine. Looked like Losa was looking for a way out because the fight was not going his way. You even heard Bryan Battle say that on the microphone after. I believe that Bryan Battle is one of the best prospects in this division. I think that he is incredibly well-rounded. He's got good power in his hands. He's going in there against a guy that I think a lot of people are overlooking in this matchup, and Randy Rude Boy Brown, who, is finding his groove, man, coming off of, he lost to Jack Della Maddalena, but then he comes out, gets a decision win over Wellington Turman, gets a KO over Muslim Salikov, which was a nasty KO, and then goes out there against Zaleski, gets the unanimous decision win. Randy Brown, 6'3", tall guy for the weight class. Him and Bryan Battle, very similar reach. Bryan Battle also 6'1", so kind of negates a little bit of the strengths that Randy has coming into these fights. But the thing about Randy, early on, very sharp boxing, very good jab, very good straight right hand, good front kicks. He's rangy. He mixes up the tools, and he starts fast, and he will throw very hard strikes at you to try to earn your respect. The problem for me is I believe Bryan Battle, with the confidence and with the tenacity and this vibe that he's running on, it's going to take a lot more than just kind of biting down and throwing some hard strikes at Bryan Battle to get this guy out of there. I think that you are going to have to absolutely go into a freaking war with Bryan Battle to win a fight. I just don't see anyone going out there and just, picking him apart or starching him. I see Randy Brown coming out, looking good early in the fight. Bryan Battle kind of, eating a couple shots here and there. Then he's going to close the distance, close Randy Brown down up against the fence, and let the combinations fly and eventually find the chin of Randy Brown and get him out of there. I'm going to say that happens in the second round. Could it be a little earlier or later? Sure. But I think the first round, Randy Brown always looks pretty dangerous to me. He's a tall guy. He's bouncing around. He's got those nasty front kicks. He's got a good jab. He's got good movement, good boxing. I could see that being a little bit of an issue for Bryan, considering that Randy is a little bit taller than maybe some of the guys Battle has been in there with. I believe Bryan Battle finds a way. I think that, he has the grappling in his back pocket. He's got a good clinch game. I think he is a complete fighter. He's got the personality. He's doing everything right to market himself. I believe in the hype train of the Butcher here in Bryan Battle. I think he's able to get this one done by finish. Moving on, we have Movsar Evloev taking on Aljamain Sterling. Now, I think this fight should be on the main card. I think it's, maybe a lot of people might disagree with that. I think this is a grappler's delight. I think that both guys have a very special skill set here that is going to make this a very interesting fight. And what I mean is Movsar Evloev, obviously one of the prospects in this division that you look at and you're like, the dude's undefeated. He's got outstanding wrestling. The striking's improving. And he's just a complete guy right now. And when you watch him fight, his advantage has always been, well, he could just out-grapple everybody he fights. And my question coming into this is Aljamain Sterling, one, former bantamweight champion, one of the best bantamweights that we've seen in the division. He's got awkward striking, awkward timing, awkward range. Everything about Aljo is just awkward. Like, he's a very hard guy to prepare for, can switch stances, good kicks, good front kicks up the middle, some sloppy hands, but it sets up the takedowns to where in this fight, I really don't know what to expect here from Aljamain Sterling, because I don't think that he's able to out-grapple Movsar. I think Movsar can dictate where this fight goes, and if it's on the feet, I believe Movsar Evloev has the better hands, while Aljo has the better kicks. And I do think that Aljo, coming from 135 up to 45, we've seen he's still fast, he still has the same output, and he is quite a bit stronger at featherweight. I mean, the way that he was able to dominate Calvin Kattar was absolutely impressive at UFC 300. I know people weren't wildly entertained by that fight. That was an incredible performance by Aljo. And then he goes out there, gets KO'd by Sean O'Malley on the quick turnaround. He beats Henry Cejudo by decision, beats a compromised TJ Dillashaw, gets the split decision over Jan, which was a controversial one. So Aljamain Sterling, he's been in there with a lot of really good competition, and him coming, up a weight class, being, from a lighter division, I think he's going to cause Movsar some issues. I think with the submissions, with the awkward striking, this may be an issue for Movsar, because while Movsar has the perfect record, he goes out there and he beats Arnold Allen by decision. But again, some of those strikes that Allen, was looking to throw in that matchup, if that could have been at this time where the rules have been changed, maybe things could have been different. I don't know. I'm not saying that for sure, but that was a very hard fight. We saw Movsar challenged. Arnold Allen, one of the best guys in the division, he's got good boxing, good movement, good footwork, good kicks of his own, and he even has good grappling. But you just see with Movsar, man, the way that he mixes things together, like against Diego Lopez, getting tested. Diego Lopez, we've seen how good he is. I know that Diego just kind of got thrown in there because they needed somebody for Movsar to fight. Still a very impressive victory for Movsar Evloev. Found himself in some tough positions, was able to get out of them, goes out there, beats Dan Ige by decision, beats Hakeem Dawodu, beats Nick Lentz. This is a guy that people would call a decision merchant. I think Aljamain Sterling's a little bit of a decision merchant. But in this fight, if someone's going to finish this, I think it's going to be Aljamain Sterling. I think that Movsar can land the better shots on the feet, but Aljo has outstanding submissions. You can say whatever you want about Aljo. The guy has outstanding submissions, and if he's able to take your back and Movsar gets a little loose in a scramble and gets a little bit careless, I could absolutely see Aljo finding a finish in this matchup. If we see a finish, I believe Aljo's the one that gets it, but I am ultimately going to go with Movsar Evloev. I just don't know how you could pick against this guy. At this particular point, maybe if he takes on Ilia Topuria or Diego Lopez again, maybe could be a different conversation. I'm not saying that I would pick against him in those. Well, against Topuria, I would. I think Topuria is the only guy in the division that probably beats him. But in this matchup, I think Movsar is just improved on the feet. I think he will dictate where the fight goes. I don't think Aljo out-grapples him. I think Movsar could even put Aljo on his back and put him in some uncomfortable spots. I got Movsar Evloev winning a unanimous decision here. Moving on to, you already saw the prediction there, Vicente Luque versus Themba Gorimbo. Look, I think that this is pretty cut and dry. This was supposed to be Vicente Luque versus Nick Diaz. I'm glad that that's not happening. I'm a big Nick Diaz fan. He's one of the guys that got me into the sport. He shouldn't be competing. He's got to worry about his personal life, get his stuff together there, because I'm sure you guys have seen, the video that was online. Didn't look particularly good. I'm glad Nick is not competing right now. So we got Themba Gorimbo in here, and Themba's a guy that is on the rise, man. This guy going out there getting a unanimous decision against Takashi, going out there getting a finish against Pete Rodriguez, getting a decision win over Ramiz Brahima, and then the most recent one, a decision over Nico Price. losing to or beating Nico Price by decision. I know that he still looked pretty good, but again, it's like this is a big step up in competition here. Vicente Luque, a guy who was just out there against Joaquin Buckley, to where a lot of people felt like he just didn't look like himself, gave up in that matchup to a guy in Buckley who is just an absolute problem in the division. He's physical, he's explosive, he's just, ever since moving down to 170 pounds, he's looked like an absolute problem in the welterweight division. Then he goes out there, beats Rafael Dos Anjos by decision, loses 2 in a row, won the kneel, which this was a nasty, situation for Luque with, I believe it was the brain bleed or whatever from taking the damage against Neal, loses to Bilal Muhammad, who's now the champion, not a bad loss there, and then beat Michael Chiesa, which was, 3 years ago here by Darce. You're kind of banking on hoping that you see the old Vicente Luque in this matchup. And a guy that's 33 years of age, he looks young, right? When you see 33 years old, but the way that he's been fighting recently, he looks like he's slowed down to me. And Vicente Luque was always one of the dark horses in the division. Great Muay Thai technique, good boxing, good hands. The only thing that he lacked to me on the feet was a little bit of head movement. He was kind of a stationary target, but again, in that back pocket, outstanding jiu-jitsu. So whenever you fought Vicente Luque, you were worried about getting KO'd on the feet, and then you were worried about him, submitting you on the floor. So again, very well-rounded fighter, very good fighter, but I don't know that we're going to see the same Vicente Luque moving forward. Until we see something different, I have to go with what we have seen, and that is that Themba Gorimbo, a guy that's young, on the rise here. I know he's 33 years of age in terms of the fight game and in the UFC. He's young on the rise here. I believe that he is that good. I think that he has good power in his hands. He's a well-rounded fighter, and I think he keeps the fight on the feet. I think he's quite a bit quicker than Vicente. And like I said, Vicente has very, very good striking, but he doesn't move his head. And I think that stationary target and the way that he just kind of moves forward is going to allow Gorimbo to land some good shots down the middle to where he's able to ultimately hurt Vicente Luque. But in this fight, I'm going to go Gorimbo by second round TKO or knockout, whatever you want to call it, in this fight, because I think that if he's going to win, he's going to have to get Vicente out of there, because the longer it kind of goes and Themba, tires himself out, I could possibly see that veteran experience of Vicente Luque starting to take over, but I don't think it happens. Off of what we've seen recently from Luque, I just think that Gorimbo, it just is a guy that has the answers, pun intended with his nickname, I guess, to solve Vicente Luque. I don't think Luque is the same guy. That's why I'm going with Gorimbo in this matchup. But if it was a prime Luque, I think Luque would get it done. Moving on, we have Anthony Smith versus Dominic Reyes. Now, this is I actually like this matchup, because with Dominic Reyes, you talk about a dude who, we were looking at one of the, what we were possibly looking at one of the best light heavyweights. This guy goes out there against John Jones and gets absolutely robbed in this fight against John Jones. Dominic Reyes absolutely won this fight. I've watched it back 2 or 3 times. He absolutely won the fight, goes in there, and then I feel like it was all of that emotion. It was just, well, I was so close to beating John Jones, and that became the whole personality of Dominic Reyes, to where they're like, you know what, we're going to give him, the vacant title opportunity against Jan Blachowicz. Goes out there, gets brutally finished by Jan Blachowicz, takes some time away, comes back, fights Yuri Prochazka. Nasty spinning elbow by Yuri Prochazka, knocks out Dominic Reyes. Then he comes back against Ryan Spann, and I was like, maybe this is it. Maybe Dominic Reyes gets back on track here and gets brutally KO'd by Ryan Spann. Nasty. The way that he hit the floor, I was scared for Dominic Reyes. And then the next fight, because every time you get KO'd, you take some time away. He comes back against Dustin Jacoby, and I was like, please, MMA gods, please give Dominic Reyes a win. And this was a very good matchup for Dominic Reyes, because Dustin Jacoby, former Glory kickboxer, not a ton of power, more of a technical, pick you apart volume type of guy. So I was like, that's a pretty good matchup for Dominic Reyes. But again, if Dustin Jacoby's going to starch anyone with one shot, it's probably going to be Dominic Reyes. And we just saw a vintage Dominic Reyes in this fight. Good footwork, good lateral movement, relying on that piston straight left hand, that left kick that he likes to use. I think Dominic Reyes, a guy that is still, 34 years of age, he still has time here to kind of get back on track, because in the light heavyweight division, it doesn't take much. A couple wins that you can rattle off here, you can put yourself back in a possible title fight opportunity or title eliminator opportunity here, considering how, stale the division is. I think Dominic Reyes, former, D1 AA football player at Stony Brook, the guy is an athlete. He's tremendous to watch. He's going in there against Anthony Smith, right? And Anthony Smith, coming off a decision loss to Roman Dolidze. They both look bad in that fight, but Anthony Smith looked atrocious in this fight against Roman Dolidze. I could not believe how bad Anthony looked. I was waiting for him to be like, "You're attacking my family," to try to pull out some motivation because he looked horrible. Maybe someone should have said that to him. "Hey, your family's under attack, dog. Maybe you should put your foot on the gas." He looked terrible. Roman Dolidze had less time to prepare for that fight than Anthony. And Anthony looked awful. And Anthony has good jiu-jitsu, but outside of that, especially since he's aged, he looks terrible. On the feet, he looks slow. He has almost no power in anything he does. By the time he throws a punch, the opponent could run out of the octagon and make it back to the locker room. I mean, it is everything that he does is slow as molasses. Then he goes out there against Vitor Petrino. Unbelievable submission. This was a great guillotine by Anthony because I don't think anyone thought he was going to win this fight because on paper, if the fight hit the floor, Anthony would be fine. But on the feet, the young Vitor Petrino with the power, it was going to be an issue. Anthony finds a submission, but again, if he doesn't find that submission, I think Vitor Petrino eventually probably finds a KO. Then he gets absolutely destroyed by Khalil Roundtree, finds a split decision win over Ryan Spann, and then loses to Johnny Walker where "You're attacking my family." That famous line was born. But look, Anthony Smith is not that guy anymore. He's doing his analyst work. He's a guy I like Anthony Smith. Look, I know we rag on him on paper. I like Anthony Smith. I've met the guy. He's a cool dude. But we got to be honest at where he is in his career. To me, he's a good analyst. He's doing his thing. And in terms of, inside the octagon from what we've seen out of these performances, even when he's winning, I just don't feel confident picking him in any fight moving forward, especially not against a guy in Dominic Reyes, who I feel like has finally started to kind of get himself back on track, has overcame those demons. John Jones has moved up to heavyweight. I feel like Reyes has a newfound focus here. I believe Dominic Reyes' speed, footwork, and that left hand are going to be a problem. He's going to be way faster than Anthony Smith in there. That he's going to walk him into some traps and ultimately knock him out. And I think it's going to be very early in the fight, first couple minutes inside the first round. Dominic Reyes by finish. Moving on. We have Nate the Train Landwehr versus Doo Ho Choi. Now, this is a fight that I've went back and forth on, and I see the odds down here, and I actually think that this is a little bit disrespectful to Doo Ho Choi, because the thing is with Choi, he goes out there, loses to Cub Swanson 7 years ago, goes out there, gets brutally finished by Jeremy Stevens, goes out there, loses to Charles Jourdain, and I believe he got pulled in for military service, so he spent some time away, and then he comes back 3 months ago against Bill Algeo. He looked great. The speed, the movement, the way the timing, he looked like he didn't miss a beat, goes in there, incredible performance against Bill Algeo, and I was like, Doo Ho Choi's back, man. He seems like he's kind of, this is a very good sign here, and he's going in here against Nate Landwehr, and the thing with Nate the Train, you see them biceps, I think Nate the Train, got a little bit of an awkward personality, a little cringe, but I do think that he's entertaining, and what we've seen from Nate Landwehr, not the most technical guy. Not the guy that you're just going to pull up highlights and be like, this is the guy I want you to fight like. He's got perfect technique here and there. No. That's not what you're going to see with Nate Landwehr. What you're going to see is a dog. You're going to see a dude that is going to win by any means necessary. He's gritty, he's tough, he's durable, and that's what you see in damn near every fight. Goes out there against Jamal Emmers. Very impressive finish by Nate Landwehr. But I feel like in every fight, Nate Landwehr does eat some shots. He doesn't have great head movement. His defense isn't very good. So there are going to be opportunities for Doo Ho Choi to land some of that good, clean striking. And I do think that Choi is going to be able to hurt Landwehr in this matchup, because what you saw against Dan Ige is a dangerous dude. I think he's one of the most underrated guys in the division. I know he's not top of the food chain at this point because he can't seem to get over that hump when he faces that next guy, like when he lost to Lerone Murphy. I was like, that's a possible big opportunity for Dan Ige. Just can't seem to get over that hump. But outside of that, he's a dangerous fighter. Really good power, really good movement. And then you see the wins here, rattling him off, rear naked choke finish over Austin Lingo. Majority decision over David Onama, who's a solid fighter on the rise. Gets a submission victory over Ludovic Klein 3 years ago, who Ludovic Klein, he's someone that we're all looking at as a really good prospect in this division. So some really solid wins from Nate Landwehr. To me, I think that Choi starts fast. I think that he's going to be more technical. He's going to land some damaging shots early to where he is able to hurt Nate. However, I believe Landwehr is able to survive. I think that he's able to grab a hold of Choi, kind of shake the cobwebs, take it into the next round, and then eventually Nate Landwehr coming off the stool, a rejuvenated guy after taking a little bit of a beating, is going to go, "You see them biceps?" and is going to go out there and get a finish over Choi here. I believe that Choi is the better technical fighter. But again, this is fighting, and sometimes it's just one of those things. You know, when it was like Cyril Gane versus Lewis, and people are like, Gane's more technical, he's faster, this, that, all things were Gane. That said, Lewis by KO. I know Gane won the fight, but that was like the meme. That's like the meme for this fight, but I still think that Nate Landwehr is able to get this thing done. I think that Choi, like I said, is more technical. I think he hurts him, but the dog of Nate Landwehr, I think, will take over if he's able to survive that early onslaught. I got Landwehr by finish. Moving on, we have Bryce Mitchell versus Gracie. I mean, what a disgrace that this is, first of all, right? I mean, everyone talks about, you hear the people out there that go, oh, the Dagestani privilege, this privilege, that privilege. What about Gracie privilege? That's a new one that I started tweeting about. I mean, Gracie privilege, for God's sake. What the hell has Gracie done to deserve a ranked opponent? He loses to Charles Jourdain by decision. He loses to Cub Swanson, the ghost of Cub Swanson, by decision. Okay, so he beats Alex Caceres by submission 5 years ago. Big whoop. Beats, 7 years ago. 8 years ago. I mean, who are these people, right? I mean, and look at that. I mean, Gracie, his last win 5 years ago, and he's getting a ranked opponent here in Bryce Mitchell, who, look, with Gracie, it's very simple. Gracie, some of the best jiu-jitsu that you will see in the UFC. There is no question about it. If this was just, no-gi grappling or in the gi or, flow grappling, whatever the hell, and it was only, submissions and a little bit of wrestling, I think Gracie could win this. But in this, I mean, how can you pick Gracie to win this fight? You're just banking on him and Bryce Mitchell getting tangled up to where Bryce is able to, or where Bryce gets a little lazy and Kron is able to find a submission. But I think, you look at Bryce Mitchell, gets absolutely brutally KO'd by Josh Emmett. That was one of the nastiest KOs we've ever seen. Just kind of walked right into that right hand. That was scary to see. Goes out there, beats Dan Ige by decision. That's a good win. Dan Ige's a solid opponent. That's better than any win Gracie has. Goes out there, loses to Ilia Topuria by arm triangle. One of the best fighters, pound for pound, in the UFC right now. You guys know how I feel about Topuria. I think we're looking at one of the greatest featherweights of all time already, and eventually, by the time it's all said and done, one of the best fighters of all time. So no harm, no foul there. Goes out there, beats Edson Barboza by decision. Goes out there, beats Andre Fili by decision. I believe Bryce Mitchell is the better overall mixed martial artist. He doesn't have better jiu-jitsu than Gracie. We get that, okay? But in terms of the wrestling, Bryce Mitchell's got better wrestling. Bryce Mitchell's going to look like Adesanya out there. He's going to look like Pineda out there with the striking. He is going to make Gracie look like, Gracie's got like cardio kickboxing striking. It's atrocious. And it's like going into a time capsule every time we watch this guy's fight. And I don't mean to rag on him, because he does have outstanding jiu-jitsu and, the lineage with the Gracies. And there's no question they're legendary and they have unbelievable jiu-jitsu. But Kron is one of those examples of, unless he's ducked away and just really been hiding it and been grinding away with the striking, it's like a time capsule, like the old school UFC fights, to where you have nothing else. Gracie might as well walk in there with a gi and just drop down on the ground and say, "Come to my guard," because that's literally how he fights. And Bryce Mitchell's not going to entertain that, I don't think. Right? I think Bryce Mitchell absolutely picks him apart on the feet, which is kind of crazy to say, because I think Bryce Mitchell, even though he's been KO'd and had some tough moments, he's decent. He's got decent striking. He's 5'10", got a 70-inch reach, got some good long kicks, got some decent hands. He's got some decent head movement at times. You saw when Topuria was throwing those big hooks to Bryce Mitchell's bobbing and weaving under there. Like, Bryce Mitchell's not that bad. And I think that his grappling, if he gets tangled up with Gracie, there could be some issues. But I think the top pressure of Bryce Mitchell, as long as he doesn't get, caught in something, I think Bryce Mitchell easily wins this fight. I don't know that he's able to get a finish. I don't think he's able to sub Gracie. That would be crazy if he could. Don't think that happens. Bryce Mitchell's not really someone that TKOs anybody, so I don't know if there's ever going to be a fight that he gets that to happen. Maybe it's this one, but I'm going to go by decision. I believe Bryce Mitchell lands some good shots on the feet, wins on control time in terms of the grappling. I got Bryce Mitchell by decision. Moving on to Cyril Gane versus Alexander Volkov. This is one of the best matchups stylistically that the UFC could book inside of the heavyweight division. 1 second. When you talk about Alexander Volkov and Gane, this is a rematch, right? We've seen this fight before. That was the last loss of, or actually it was Tom Aspinall, so it was even before that. But outside of the Aspinall loss, Alexander Volkov goes out there, beats Rosenstrike by finish, goes out there, finishes Romanov, goes out there, subs Tai Tuivasa, goes out there, beats Sergey Pavlovich. I mean, what a streak Volkov has been on. I mean, this dude is, not only is he 6'7", but he's a powerful dude. He's got, good long front kicks up the middle, good straight shots. But the problem is there's no volume here for Volkov. It's kind of just single shots that he throws. And I think that this fight is going to look a lot like the first time around where we saw these two meet, because with Ciryl Gane, I mean, this dude is he's one of the most special heavyweights we've ever seen inside of mixed martial arts. The way that he moves on the feet, it's like when we talk about Aspinall, he moves like he's a lightweight. That's Ciryl Gane. The way that he throws his techniques, I mean, he's got perfect technique, very tight technique. His array of weapons in the arsenal is very broad, and I think that in this fight, you saw him go out there and get the finish over Sergey Spivak, which was much needed after getting dominated by John Jones in the highly anticipated John Jones heavyweight debut. Goes out there, finishes Tai Tuivasa. There was a scare in that matchup where he got caught by Tai, but outside of that, he was just absolutely picking him apart. Those front kicks up the middle from Gane are nasty. He's got good boxing. He slides in and out of range. He lost to Francis Ngannou by decision, got out-grappled there, and then he goes out there and finishes Derek Lewis as the fight progressed, by just kind of picking him apart and frustrating him. Alexander Volkov's a problem. He's a tall guy. He's got good striking, and I think that he can cause some problems with Ciryl Gane if he resorts to the grappling, because I think with this being only a 3-round fight instead of being a 5-round main event, on a fight night, this serves Ciryl Gane pretty well, actually. And I think it also can benefit Volkov if he's able to implement the grappling. But I think if this fight plays out on the feet, which I think that that's where it's going to play, Gane is way too fast. He's got good footwork. It's the speed, and more speed that is going to give Volkov issues, because in the first fight you saw that. While Volkov has put together a nice win streak here, Sergey's got good boxing, but he's kind of a slower guy for the division. Tai Tuivasa, slower guy for the division. Alexander Romanov, very slow guy for the division. Jairzinho Rosenstrike, stiff and kind of slow and kind of like herky-jerky. He's not fighting anybody in here that's fast. Goes out there, Tom Aspinall's speed was a problem for him. And the last time Volkov took on Gane, the speed was an issue. So I think if Volkov's going to win this fight, he's got to mix in the grappling. While he does have good front kicks, he does have, some good power in his hands, they're just not fast enough. And Gane is able to get out of the way of that. And I think that Ciryl Gane, the speed and the timing of Gane, he coming out, he lost to John Jones. That was kind of embarrassing. I mean, yeah, it's John Jones, but to get finished that early in the heavyweight debut of John Jones, that left a bad taste in the mouth of Gane. Goes out there, incredible performance against Spivak, gets the finish. I think we see a Ciryl Gane that comes in, is motivated, is dialed in. I know he's been filming movies and doing all these different things, and people are saying he's ducking Aspinall. So there's a lot of pressure on Gane here because he's one of the bigger names in the division. I would love a fight with him and Tom Aspinall at some point for the title. I think that stylistically that would be a really fun fight. But the question for me is, if Volkov does come in and try to implement the grappling, can Gane stop the takedowns? Because if Volkov gets on top of him, I don't know if Gane's going to be able to work his way back to his feet, because that's one of the issues we've seen with Ciryl, is if you take him down, he doesn't do a great job of getting back to his feet. And if he does, he leaves himself being vulnerable to being submitted. But I don't think that Volkov has good enough grappling to be able to just control Gane for 15 minutes. I think Gane picks him apart and wins a decision here. I think the speed, the versatility in terms of the striking is going to be too much for Volkov in this rematch. I think it's going to look a lot like the first fight, only it being 15 minutes this time. I got Gane by decision. Moving on to the co-main event of the evening. I cannot wait for this matchup between Shavkat Rakhmonov and Ian Garry. Got a lot to say about this fight because I think that, one, someone's always got to go. And when you talk about two prospects in a division meeting in the primes of their career, Shavkat Rakhmonov, 30 years of age, Ian Garry, 27, these guys are meeting at the right time. Former training partners. We've seen the sparring footage floating around to where it looks like Gary's landing some good shots here and there. They are going very light there. And we all know that Shavkat Rakhmonov, where does he want to get this fight? To the mat. Shavkat Rakhmonov has better grappling than Ian Garry. He's got better submissions than Ian Garry. And I know Ian has been over at Shoot to Box. Props to him for doing what he's got to do to, round out his skill set. But this is very cut and dry to me. On the feet, I think Ian Garry is going to give Shavkat a world of problems. I think Ian Garry is slick. He's got good striking. His hands, his long-range weapons are really his best friend. And I think one of the issues with Ian Garry, coming into this is the fact that Shavkat is one of those guys that's just really gritty, and he will not stop unless you absolutely put him out, because Shavkat, out of 18 victories, all of them are by finish. And when you look at the resume of Shavkat, submission win over Wonderboy Thompson. Wonderboy's a tricky guy on the feet. He had no answers for Shavkat Rakhmonov. No one just goes at Wonderboy and subs him like that. Goes in there, submits Jeff Neal. And a lot of people are going to say, oh, well, Ian Garry and Jeff Neal, you saw that fight. Well, maybe Ian Garry can do what Jeff Neal did. Very different style of fighters. Just because they're strikers doesn't mean that they're the same. Jeff Neal, he's a better boxer than Ian Garry. He likes to fight on the inside, to where Ian Garry likes to keep the fight on the outside. He doesn't have particularly good inside fighting abilities. Then Shavkat goes out there, submits Neil Magny. I know Neil Magny's kind of a gatekeeper and a journeyman at this point, but finishing Neil Magny, that's pretty impressive. Goes out there, then he beats Carlston Harris, and at this point, we're kind of, these wins aren't particularly great, but still, 18 wins, all by finish. Shavkat's a problem. And when you talk about Ian Garry, goes out there against Michael Venom Page. I know that it was like an underwhelming victory. It was something where people are like, it was boring. He didn't just stand in front of him. If you're going to stand in front of Michael Venom Page, you're an idiot. Like you, unless you're Wonderboy Thompson, you're an idiot, because you're going to get made look like a fool. And you saw when Garry decided to keep it on the feet, MVP, it doesn't matter how old that guy gets. His striking seems to just get faster. His movement seems to get faster. Ian Garry was so quick to just resort to the grappling. He did a good job controlling MVP, which, by the way, not particularly easy to do. The only guy that's really been able to do that to Venom Page was Logan Storley, I believe it was, over in Bellator. That guy's a really high-level wrestler. So Ian Garry going out there and controlling MVP, that shows the improvements in terms of the offensive grappling with Ian Garry. Goes out there against Jeff Neal, wins a split decision. Jeff Neal, again, a guy that's tough. He's got good boxing, good movement. He's a durable dude, and he finds a way to just kind of, Jeff Neal dances. I say Jeff Neal, he's like a dancer. He kind of fights like this, and then he gets on the inside, lets the boxing fly. Gave Ian Garry some problems, because if you can close Ian Garry down, make him fight in a phone booth, he doesn't like that. And then you saw him against Neil Magny. Beat the brakes off Neil Magny, was dropping him with calf kicks, taunting him. And he just embarrassed Neil Magny. And then before that, goes out there, nasty head kick setup against D-Rod, worked it to the body, then eventually brought it upstairs. Goes out there against Song Kanan, dominated the fight other than hanging in the pocket a little too long, got a little careless, got dropped with a nasty shot by Kanan, was able to, find his wits about him and get back to his feet. But again, two guys in their prime, both have very unique skill sets. I think this is very simple. If Ian Garry can keep the fight on the feet and keep Shavkat at range and sit on the back foot, and he can just kind of slide around, because Ian Garry, he has very good timing. He's got outstanding kicks, and he has really, really, really good movement. And more importantly, really good lateral movement. A lot of guys, they can move forward, in and out, and do all that. But he moves side to side just about better than anybody probably in the UFC. I think him and Adesanya have some of the best side to side lateral movement, which, why do I keep bringing that up? Because if someone's going to be pressuring you up against the fence to try to get takedowns, you're going to make it hard on them, because if you're not becoming a stationary target and you're kind of giving them, a little bit of cat and mouse game, that's hard to get a hold of you. So I think if Ian Garry comes in, he fights behind his long-range weapons, he keeps Shavkat at bay, attacks the lead leg of Rakhmonov. I don't think Shavkat does a great job of dealing with low kicks. We haven't seen, someone like Ian Garry that has the ability to really, really attack the calf. I think if Garry does that, he's going to put Shavkat in a world of problems. But for me, what this comes down to is I just cannot pick against Shavkat Rakhmonov. This dude has looked like an absolute stud. The striking on the feet, he's, he looks kind of methodical, a little stuck in the mud, doesn't move his head a whole lot. And then out of nowhere, he'll throw a wild technique out of nowhere, a flying knee, a spinning back kick or whatever, and it may find your chin, or it just backs you up to where he can close you down up against the fence. But 18 wins, all by finish. I find it hard to believe that if he wins this fight, it's not by a finish. I think that he's able to eventually close down Ian Garry, eventually able to hurt him with a shot, get him down, and then eventually find a submission, maybe by rear naked choke or a guillotine or something. I think Ian Garry, as good as he is, I know a lot of people don't like him. He's cringe and, he's got some weird shit going on in his personal life. But when it comes to the fighter, the dude is spectacular. He's got really good kicks. He's got good timing. He's tricky on the feet. I just think that one of the areas that Ian Garry struggles is when you make it a boxing match, when you turn it into an in close quarters type of fight. I believe Shavkat is the type of guy that can get to that range against Ian Garry. We saw Jeff Neal give problems to both of these guys, but I think stylistically, Jeff Neal, the way he fought Ian Garry, I think Shavkat can implement a similar game plan. And on top of that, Ian is going to have to be worried about the grappling of Shavkat the entire time. So just when, Rakhmonov is standing there striking, you're going to have to keep that level change in the back of your mind. That is a very, very big, we've seen how that plays out. Like Usman against Masvidal, you're so worried about the grappling that you get hit with a shot that, you're so reactive, you get, dropped with a shot. I can see something like that happening. I think, and then Shavkat hops on the neck. I think Shavkat gets a submission. I'm going to probably say in the third round. I think Garry has some success early, but then eventually Shavkat outgrits him. Moving on to the main event of the evening. We have Alexandre Pantoja and Kai Asakura. So Kai Asakura is the new toy, right? He's the new toy inside the UFC. He's the new kid on the block, a guy that I actually made a video here on my channel when the UFC signed him because I was excited about this signing. I thought, Kai Asakura, he's a dude that fought at bantamweight inside of Ryzen. He's fought against Manel Kape where they're 1-1 apiece. He's went in there against Kyoji Horiguchi, who is another really good fighter, good striker outside of the UFC. And he's put on some really good performances here. I mean, getting a win over Allen, getting a win over Kenta. He lost in this matchup here. Goes out there against Pantoja, gets a KO, knee to the body. This was a nasty finish. If you have not seen this guy's highlight reel, I mean, he's got some crazy finishes. And then goes out there with a nasty finish over Juan Archuleta, who's a very good fighter from Bellator, who's actually TJ Dillashaw's teammate and fights a lot like him. He had no answers for Kai. And Kai's one of those dudes. This dude is an absolute star over in Japan. He's got over 1 million subscribers on YouTube. He has a huge fan base. And when you watch this guy fight, it's like a storm early on. He's got a variety of techniques. He's aggressive, he's fast, he's powerful, and he is very, very dangerous in the beginning of the fight. The only problem with Asakura when you watch his highlight film, he's very aggressive. And if he's going to win this fight, it's going to have to be by KO early on, because I think that, one of the things with him is as the fight plays out, we can see that if you're able to implement some of the grappling, if you're able to take him into the later rounds, you can find some window of opportunity. But early on, look out. This guy is dangerous. He's got knees. He's got flying techniques. I mean, he has it all. And when it comes to the power, he's definitely going to be one of the most powerful and hard-hitting dudes inside of the UFC flyweight division. But I think something important to note, two things actually. One, he's cutting down the flyweight. What is that going to do at 31 years of age, dropping a whole extra 10 pounds to come into the UFC for, this guy didn't even have to take a fight before getting a title fight here in the UFC. That's how desperate the UFC is to probably have a new champion other than Pantoja, maybe, but also they're just desperate for contenders. And this guy's a star, and if he wins the belt, they're going to go probably do a pay-per-view in Japan and put Tatsuro Taira on there. I think that they were hoping that he could have gotten a win in his last fight over Royval. That didn't happen. But they're hoping, I think, for Kai Asakura to kind of tap into that Japan market. And if you're going to find anyone from there that could come in and give problems to Pantoja, it's going to be Kai Asakura. The other issue with Asakura, a lot of his finishes, a lot of his nasty ground and pound are shots that aren't particularly legal inside of the UFC. You can't just soccer kick somebody to the head. The rules, there have been some rule changes that can help him out a little bit, but the rules are quite a bit looser in Ryzen. They're still loose in the UFC, but there's a few things here and there that you're not able to do, and I think that that's something important to factor into this matchup. But when you talk about Alexandre Pantoja, I think that this is one of the most underrated guys in UFC history. I think pound for pound, he should be higher on the rankings. He does not get enough respect on his name. Goes out there against Steve Erceg, wins a close decision. I know people will say that this was controversial. I still thought that Pantoja edged it out. goes out there, beats Brandon Royval again, beats Brandon Moreno by decision, beats Alex Perez by finish, submits Brandon Royval. I mean, this guy has beaten Moreno a million times. He's beaten Royval a million times. He's beaten everybody, basically, in the division. And then he goes out there against Usyk, who's got good boxing, good grappling, and Pantoja just finds a way against everybody. And that's how I describe Pantoja, is just a gritty fighter, man. He's gritty, he's durable, and he's incredibly well-rounded. But on the feet, I believe Kai Asakura is much better. I think he's faster, I think he's got more power, and I think he's more explosive. So if we see a finish in this fight, I think it happens in the early rounds, and I think that it's Kai Asakura getting a finish over Pantoja, but I just don't see it happening. I don't think that anyone on the current UFC roster in this division is the guy to beat Pantoja. I could have seen how Muhammad Mukayev could have given Pantoja some issues because of the wrestling, but I think Pantoja, with the well-rounded skill set, the championship experience, we really haven't seen Kai Asakura go 5 rounds. I think that the longer this fight plays out, I think Pantoja is going to mix in the grappling, mix in the striking, and eventually just wears him down and just starts ragdolling him around, because we've seen Pantoja in there with the best guys in the world in the championship rounds find ways to get it done. And I know Asakura's fun. I know he's explosive. I know it would be interesting to see him as the champion. I just don't think it happens. I think that, unless he's able to find a shot early, I think Pantoja does whatever he kind of wants as the fight progresses. I think early, Asakura gives him some issues, but I think Pantoja mixes in the striking, comes out with a grapple-heavy approach to where maybe he can find a submission, but I'm going to say that he just drowns Kai with pressure, pace, and just relentless pursuit, as we've seen from Pantoja. I think Pantoja is one of the most underrated fighters in UFC history. I think that he is one of the best flyweights of all time. You got Mighty Mouse. I know people want to throw Cejudo's name in there. I think Pantoja has an unbelievable resume. I think he's one of the best flyweights ever. I think he should be higher ranked on the pound-for-pound rankings. The dude's a dog. Put some respect on his name. I think we see an and still come the end of the night at UFC 310. But if you guys enjoyed this video, please give it a like. Comment your thoughts down below. Subscribe to the channel. Turn on the notification bell so you do not miss an upload. I would appreciate it. See you next time.